Welcome to the Value Investor TV podcast. This is the podcast that helps you grow your wealth and become financially independent. My name is Becco, and I have a special guest today, Jason Krom. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Becco. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So, Jason and I met online, and we thought it would be a great opportunity for Jason to come onto the podcast to explain to you guys what it looks like as, day in the life of a CFO, and also talk about his company, Hall of Fame Village, which, recently went public. So we'll talk more about that in the second episode. But first, Jason, really good to have you here.
Yeah,
It's
thanks.
really opportune time because there's a lot of things that we need to talk about in terms of your business, in terms of the market condition,
Yep.
especially also kind of the way that you guys went to the public market, all those things involved with your company. There's a lot to talk about. So really excited to get started. But
Yep.
before we do that, can you give us a quick intro of who you are, what the company's all about to
Yeah,
start?
sure. No, yeah, and thanks again for having me on. So, yeah, my name's Jason Krom. I'm the Chief Financial Officer of the Hall of Fame Resort and Entertainment Company. And what we are is just that. We're a resort and entertainment company where we leverage the power and the popularity of professional football. At a 30,000 foot view, because I'm sure we'll dive into greater details as this conversation continues, Becca, but we really operate across three main verticals. The first being destination based themed assets, the second being our media vertical, and the third being our gaming vertical.
Hmm. Yeah, so those three verticals, really exciting, kind of sort of different verticals, and we'll talk about sort of
Yeah.
long-term strategy and what that means. You guys lay out very clearly on the 10K, kind of
Sure.
the three-phase strategy, which we will talk about in the second episode. But thanks for the
Yep.
sort of high-level overview. So before we talk about kind of the company and the details of the strategy, I think it would be interesting to kind of understand your personal journey as a CFO
Yeah.
and how you got to where you are today, running, Hall of Fame Village, and before that, you were serving as sort of in a financial role in various different industries. So, as
Mhm.
Steve Jobs would say, connect the dots. Tell us about your story, how you sort of ended, how you ended up where you are today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's been a windy road across all these different industries, but I've just learned so much through my career up to this point, Becco. I wouldn't change it for anything. I started my career at Johnson and Johnson, where I graduated from their financial leadership development program. While I was at J&J, I also went back to school, got my MBA at night and on the weekends at NYU in Manhattan. And then from there, you really had roles of increasing responsibilities across all those different sectors, including pharmaceuticals with companies like J&J, Novartis, medical devices with Philips Healthcare, consumer products with Stanley Black and Decker, food and beverage with the Hershey Company, and retail with Abercrombie and Fitch. Every other organization I've been a part of before this has been publicly traded. They've been around for over 100 years, so this is really my first startup experience when I joined Hall of Fame Village, which is now Hall of Fame Resort and Entertainment Company. I've got to tell you, I'm really loving it. When I went back for my MBA, one of my specializations was entrepreneurship and innovation because I really thought, as a finance leader, there's a lot of value to add in these sorts of situations where not everything is black and white, where you don't have perfect data, but really trying to guide data-driven analysis and decision making across the entire organization. That's always been something that's been a driver for me throughout each of my roles and all of my positions as I've grown through my career. So, like I said, I'm thrilled to be here at the Hall of Fame Resort and Entertainment Company. It's an experience unlike any of the others that I've had before. But that's just a quick view of how I've gotten to where I am, and I think one of the key things to point out for everybody is really as a finance function, it's staying flexible, being adaptable to changes in the business, and really being that support for the rest of the organization, and being that kind of objective shareholder in the room.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting, kind of your circuitous route to where you are today, the Hall of Fame Resort and
Yeah.
Entertainment Company. Sorry about I messed up the name up front there. It's Hall of Fame
No,
Resort
no,
and
no worries.
Entertainment Company, not Village. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, like your circuitous path to where you are today, the fact that this is your first sort of startup experience, it is interesting to think about like publicly traded company as a startup because that's sort of
Yeah,
not the mindset that people think about. But
right.
ultimately, it's just a way of financing the company. Ultimately, startup, you can have different kinds of startups, and with the recent
Mhm.
sort of frenzy sort of in the market to raise money in the public market and sort of like public market being really hot in terms of raising
Mhm.
capital, startups can certainly be in a startup phase while at the same time being public. So that's kind of a shift I
Right.
feel that is new into the market
Mhm.
dynamic. So which we sort of will talk about later with
Yeah.
SPAC and everything else. But it is
Mhm.
interesting, kind of your path from pharmaceutical industry to this now sort of a sports entertainment industry, and but the key theme there from your perspective is really driving decisions based on financial data and making sort of those decisions approaching from that angle.
Right. Yep. Exactly. And yeah, I've grown up as a huge sports fan, so just being in the sports industry now, Becco, is just something I've always said if I had the opportunity, I would jump at. So being here at a resort and entertainment company, but really based on leveraging the popularity, the power of professional football, is just really something that I'm super passionate about. And especially when you're working in the startup space, it's really, really important to just make sure you're passionate about the business. We're a team of about 30 people right now. We'll grow that obviously, but the culture that we're building too is just it's phenomenal. It's a great match with how I think it's we're in this together. We call ourselves teammates all the time, not just because we're a sports business, but because we know we're shoulder to shoulder and chipping in any way that we possibly can to continue to drive the business forward. And day in at our company from the CFO seat, no day is like any other. I mentioned, I appreciate the gray areas where we can help in terms of not a lot of data on this, but we really need to drive a strong decision. How do we do that? Being able to have those conversations with cross-functional business partners is really, really important. There are days where I go from one meeting where I'm reviewing invoices to the next meeting over the next half hour, talking about the 5-year growth plan across all three of our verticals. So you really just need to stay flexible, be very, very adaptable. And I'm sure we'll talk about this at some point, but I'd be remiss to not mention COVID and the impact that it had on us as a small company in the process of going public when COVID hit. We had to make some changes. The whole organization worked remotely for a period of time, which it's tough, but everybody got used to it, and we continue to drive the business forward. But we're really feeling like we're turning the corner, feeling very, very energized. There's more vaccines out there. The governor of Ohio is starting to set out. Here's what needs to happen to open up outdoor activities, and we've got a really nice slate as long as we're able to have them in the back half of the year of events scheduled across the Tom Benson Hall of Fame Stadium on campus, including the Women's Football Alliance Championships this summer, 2 Pro Football Hall of Fame enshrinements, the NFL preseason kickoff game between the Steelers and the Cowboys, and the Highway 77 Music Fest that we've announced. And that's actually started already. We're hosting youth tournaments at our sports complex over the past few weeks. So we're starting to see ourselves turn the corner, and that's just really energized us as an organization as well.
Yeah, that's great. um a lot to kind of unpack there, if I could,
Mm.
for a second. So you talked about sort of the
Sure.
impact of COVID-19, and how you had to be flexible. That's sort of one thing that you mentioned. Another thing you mentioned is, as it relates to that, sort of a day in the life of a public a CFO of a publicly traded company, a small one
Yeah.
at that. I'd like to kind of talk about the second part first, and then
Yeah.
go into the COVID in a bit more detail. And so,
Yep.
day in the life of a CFO of a publicly traded company,
Mhm.
sort of, and then tie that to your previous experience in other companies. So maybe walk us through perhaps some of the differences or similarities across different functions that you served in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm actually kind of struck back as I think back on a lot of the similarities. So, what we're doing now, we're building processes. We are a startup, but at the same time, work needs to get done. We need to do it efficiently. We need to maximize the resources that we have on our teams and across the organization. So, from that perspective, not much of a change. But like I said, probably the biggest thing that sticks out from my perspective as a difference is just needing to be so flexible, so adaptable. I mean, there's stuff in terms of analyses and spreadsheets and things that I've been working on that I haven't done for the past couple of years in my career. So I pivot to that, get that done, and then boom, again, move off to
Hmm.
the financing vehicles that we brought in, the 5-year plan across all three of the verticals. How do they work together? The overall strategy of our organization and how we drive that forward. So and again, I sort of draw energy from that because it's really what I enjoy. I don't like to come in and have a to-do list of 10 things that I need to just check off throughout the day. I'd rather come in on that scale of, very standardized versus, I wouldn't go as far as chaos, but, it's just not knowing exactly what you're going to work on throughout the day. That I actually enjoy because it just means you're learning as you go, and that you're really helping to drive the business forward.
Hmm. That makes a lot of sense. With the established companies, obviously you have, I don't want to say the word callous, but kind of set in stone
Yeah.
processes. You just have to follow that. Whereas in a startup like yours, you really are in a mode of creating process and being really dynamic. And so I really
Yep.
appreciate that part of it. And it's not for everybody, right? Startup isn't for everybody,
Right.
and
Yep.
so that's good that I appreciate the comment there on that one. And then for the
No,
COVID
absolutely.
19,
Yeah.
um, the fact that you have to be very flexible, the fact
Yeah.
that you basically right in the middle of it, right, that you decided to go public, and you're basically running a team of 30 people, so not big at all for a publicly traded
Mhm.
company. um, Obviously it's not just obviously you, the whole team is involved. And so what was that like, sort of shepherding the whole team through this kind of rough times? And obviously at the end of this, we're now sort of entering a phase where it's looking really bright for you, and a lot of things in the
Mhm.
pipeline. So turning the corners here in this quarter and the next. So talk to us about sort of the importance of your team members, and what that was
Mhm.
like.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, Becco, in terms of working through COVID-19 and all the challenges that it brought to us as an organization, it really revolves around communication. Our CEO Mike Crawford is just one of the best leaders I've worked for. Great at communicating across all levels of the organization. Just knowing here's where we are as a company, here's the implications on the strategy, and here's how all the different functional areas are chipping in to make that happen. Obviously, we saw some short term impacts to that. We've talked about that on our earnings call in terms of events, those sorts of things. But our long term goalposts in terms of our revenue goals, our EBITDA goals, they haven't changed, and that's something we take great pride in. That is our vision, over the longer terms in terms of our annual run rate revenue and EBITDA. Those haven't moved at all. So we're still marching towards the same path over the long term. Also, not to make light of a global pandemic, but we're also, from a business standpoint, hoping to build our verticals, build assets while we're going through the pandemic, so that when our fans and our consumers are ready after COVID's over, we're going to have a bunch of new assets, new ways for them to interact with us as an organization. So once we get through this, we're expecting to be ready for our fans and our consumers. And yeah, obviously I'll throw in there as well. Fan team member safety are going to be first and foremost in everything we do. So we're very much working in lockstep, with local state guidelines in terms of when things can open up. But we're pretty excited about what we'll have to offer when the world does approach normalcy again, coming out of COVID.
Yeah, I love that. This is sort of a common theme that I hear in most business leaders, is that, in fact, COVID-19 was obviously to not minimize the impact of that at all, but it also allowed for companies to really put their head down and
Right.
start building these product lines,
Yeah.
really make things better, cut excess, and make sure the company is set the company up for success when things turn around. It allowed the business leaders to sort of take a break and really put the head down and and make sure the company is in a better shape, and feels like you're sort of you definitely took advantage of that sort of time as well from your company standpoint, which I'd love to talk about in the next episode, as we do a more deep dive onto your company.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I
That
got a
sounds
couple
good.
more questions as part of this
Yeah.
episode. I think we have to kind of talk about this really quick. You
Yep.
decided to go public as a SPAC, and
Mm.
SPAC has been sort of frenzy in the last year and this year as well. And tell us about your kind of reasoning and yeah, and what that process was like.
Yeah, yeah, no, it was. Thanks for the question, Becca. Yeah, it was a good process for us. SPAC again, special purpose acquisition company. We merged with Gordon Point Acquisition Corp. In the beginning of July 2020. So we're now traded on the Nasdaq. Our ticker symbol is HOFV. We were excited to complete that transaction. It obviously gave us access to the liquidity that comes along with being publicly traded. But given that as a company, we also reiterate, and we do it all the time with our staff. Being a publicly traded company, very different than a private company. We're really cognizant of all the responsibilities that come along with being publicly traded. Including all the disclosures you've got to do, reporting requirements, internal controls from a finance perspective in terms of how we guide the organization and make sure we're doing everything that we need to do as a publicly traded company. So that was a bit of a change, but something that the organization has really embraced and has really worked with us on. And I just reiterate, our company is still really really young. Given we went public through the SPAC less than a year ago, we really see ourselves. I mentioned our long term goals in terms of revenue and EBITDA. So those are really driven with us being long term play based on the diversity of our three business verticals being destination assets, media, and gaming, but also the synergy, which I'd love to jump into greater detail with you, whether it's next episode or whenever you'd like, Becco. But really think that's where we drive a lot of value as a company and a resort and entertainment organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of investors are sort of hung up on SPAC and like direct listing or IPO, like different ways of accessing the capital market. But at the end of the day, it is just that. It is just a way of accessing the capital market. And once you're there, you sort of have to put that behind and really look forward. And
Right.
ultimately, you have to get down to the fundamentals of the business, which you guys are definitely doing. I'd love to sort of dig into that
Mhm.
more in the next episode. But thank you
Sure.
for kind of walking us through SPAC and what that was kind of like. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
so I'd like to close out this episode with one last question.
Mhm. Sure.
For those who are interested in becoming a CFO like yourself, for those who are
Mhm.
aspiring to be in a position of shepherding a publicly traded company as a CFO, I think this question would be interesting. So who do you look up to most, generally, and perhaps this could be more industry specific or field
Mhm.
specific, but I'll just cast it out there. Who do you look up to most?
Yeah, Becca, I'd probably say three people. So,
Okay.
one of which is you think back through my career growing up. I've got to start actually at the beginning. So, on a personal basis, my mom. Growing up, it was just honestly me and her. She was a public school teacher for 42 years and just really instilled in me a strong work ethic. The importance of education, of learning, and that's something I've kept with me that's really helped me get to where I am today. Never stop learning, whether it's reading books on finance functions or growing a business, just different things that are out there that could just expand your horizons as a true professional. Um, and the second would be, yeah, honestly, now, my wife, Maggie. So I've moved around a lot for my career, for different opportunities, like we talked about earlier, Becco. And she's really been the rock of our family. I've got twins at home, Matt and Emma. We moved around a lot. So, I could grow my career and end up with where we are today. But, my wife's always been really supportive, my biggest fan, which really just let me focus on what I need to do at the office and driving the business forward. And then Probably the third person I always think about when I think of the finance function is, our company president. When I worked for Johnson and Johnson, really early in my career, he was a mentor of mine, and I was sitting with him one day and just talking about my career and how he sees finance within his organization. And he said, Jason, that there's two people on my board that I value above almost everything else, and that's finance and HR. I looked at him. I said, okay, well, why is that? What causes that? He's like, because they have the whole purview of the entire organization, and I hold them accountable to doing that. So that's something I've kept with me through the rest of my career too. Is I'm not just a bean counter. I'm not just reporting on results. It's really driving the business forward and being a collaborative business partner and understanding what leaders across all of our different functions are really doing from a goals perspective, what they're doing to drive the business forward. Like I mentioned earlier, just really providing that data-driven analysis to help make the best decisions that we can. So I'd say probably those three people.
Love it. I love that. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Jason, that was great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Really look forward to digging into the company in more detail in the next episode. But thanks for joining for this episode. And is there any way, if people are interested in learning about you more specifically or about the company, any resources that you want to give a shout to?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'd point everybody to our website, which is HOFRECO, HOFRECO .com, where they could dig into our investor relations site, learn more about our different businesses, see the latest announcements. We're also out there on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and all the social media channels as well, for both Hall of Fame Resort and Entertainment Company, as well as our destination in Canton, Ohio, which is Hall of Fame Village.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thanks, Jason, for coming onto the podcast, and thank you all
Yeah,
for
great.
listening.
Thanks so much for having me, Becco. I really enjoyed it.
Awesome, awesome. We look forward to having you in the next episode. Thanks, Jason.
All right, great.
All right.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. I'll see you guys in the next episode.